OCs. I like making them. They're nice. These characters are what make our worlds pop, so it's important to have some good original characters. Otherwise, well, you have nothing. Now, I bet you're wondering, but how do I make good, engaging characters that people like? And I'm right there with you, buddy. I have no idea. But I do know characters I like, and I think my characters are neat, so I'm going to show you how I make them. So, let us dive into the vortex where I'll show you my vortex. No. Anyways, whip out your sketchbooks and prepare to traumatize our imaginary friends. And subscribe. First, why am I making this OC? For me, I'm going to be creating an OC for this game idea I have. The OC in question is not the protagonist, so they're going to be filling a role in another person's story, meaning I have to treat them a little differently. They need to reinforce the depressing setting and contrast with the other characters so that it creates this sort of atmosphere in the game. See, in the game, I need a cheaper way for people to spend money for buffs in the game. So this character needs to be like an alternative, probably to the hospital, since they pretty much have a monopoly on health buffs. Now here is where I usually choose my theme, sort of a central concept or question. The latter usually for my main characters, but I'm going to use it here. To use it, you have to find the core question of the medium. So I guess the core question the game is asking is, can we find true happiness? And every character represents a different response to that, mostly negative, as I said, depressing. So I'd like probably a positive perspective on the question to sort of contrast with everyone else. So I guess if I want to have a positive perspective, the character could represent, yes, true happiness is possible. But you gotta add a little nuance, so true happiness is possible, at least on the outside. But as you look deeper, maybe not. You know, you gotta have a little conflict, a little contradiction in there. Next, how is this character meant to make people feel? Usually, the point of making stories is to share them. However, I don't know how to make games, so I'm probably never going to share this game. But assuming that I do, I'm putting this character in there for a reason to make people feel a certain way. So what do I want people to feel? Well, I probably want them to feel overprotective, generous, happy, supportive, you know, so they spend more money. Next, what are my intended scenarios? My interactions with other characters. Usually I get inspired from music or memes, funny sound bites or relationship dynamics are a good start. I don't really have any inspiration right now, but luckily I already know who they'll interact with. Obviously the main character. So a quick rundown. The main character, Gabe, they're a poor drug addict. So with that in mind, I don't really want a toxic relationship because I want people to feel supportive and generous to the character. If this OC is taking advantage of poor drug addicts, then they're not going to feel that generous. So unless I do a twist, which seems like a lot of work, the characters probably have a good relationship. You know, being kind to people and nice to people around them, maybe a little naive to others. So basically, what we have so far is our character sells stuff and has close relationships with drug addicts. They're pretty naive, but they're also an alternative to the hospital, which means that they're probably helping people, but also there's probably a relationship there, maybe combative with the hospital between this character and the hospital. That's redundancy, but you get the idea. Next, time to build their setting and environment. Also, you don't have to do this in a specific order, but this is the order I like to do it when I'm starting from scratch, which I assume most people aren't starting from scratch. They probably already have a character in mind, or they have a setting in mind that they're trying to add the character to. So, do your own thing. I'm not an expert on this. This is how I do stuff. You don't even know what characters I have. That could be terrible. Anyways, what type of society does our OC exist in? Most importantly, what is their view of self versus the normal state of society? An example would be a character in a medieval society. What's their view of lords or kings? Not the individuals, but the very idea of kings itself, since that's seen as the normal, natural state of society. Maybe your character thinks kings are unnatural. With that in mind, the game takes place in modern America, but like a dystopian version of modern America, like Detroit. See, our character lives in the city of Doug, a very poor yet populated place. Everyone hates it. But we have to remember, this character is meant to be a contrast with the other characters, so having a more happy and optimistic person might be a good way to represent that, you know? However, the character still needs to fit within the world. They need to reinforce the setting sentiments, so I think making them homeless, which is a large problem in these cities, does a good job at that, but also gives good contradiction. A vibrant homeless person selling things out of an encampment could be a very lovable person. Kind of reminds me of that one guy from Papers, Please. Wasn't homeless, but similar vibes of pity. I think this character could serve a similar vibe and also give good vibes to the game overall. As for feelings about society, they probably feel good about themselves for being able to survive, and while they want society to change, it's still pretty hopeful for it, which goes back to our theme. Now that we have a good idea of what this character represents, we can get to the good stuff. Age. This is usually based on their interactions with the setting, so almost all the other characters are young, so making this character older, maybe in their 40s or 50s, that can make some good contrast and also give us that wise elder vibe. Gender. I usually base it off the interactions of society, but honestly, I'm thinking male since the main character is male and it could have that effect of this will be you in the future, you know? Ethnicity slash species. This has to fit in with your setting, and this is going to be a very realistic setting. So obviously human, and probably white, so the main character relates more, but as long as it's not a core part of your identity or your theme, it doesn't really matter. The nationality or place of origin. Usually it's just the setting, but this can really impact how your character interacts with people. So honestly, let's make them Cuban. Why not? I mean, they're going to be selling products with a health boost, and Cuba's known for its great doctors, so why not have a middle-aged former Cuban doctor living in America who sells medicine on the street? Sounds good to me. And now the moment you've been waiting for, the part where I actually start drawing. I start with some simple sketches. Normally I'd play around with different shapes and themes, but since I'm adding this character to an already existing universe, I need to match that art style, so I'll pull up their peers as references. Your art style can change a lot of things here, not just how the character looks, but also the features they have. Styles with more corners usually give me this more extreme vibe, I don't know why. With the style I'm using, you may notice there aren't any noses or ears, so if I add them here, they would really stand out and feel unique. I'm not going to do that because this person is supposed to be pretty basic and sort of blended to the background, but that's just because of my setting. But for your own characters, go wild. Robotic implants, animal limbs, multiple consciences, why not? This is, after all, your character, so with the information we have, the design should feel pretty obvious. And here's the finished product. But now we need a name, something that captures the character's essence. Yurgis. So we're done. Now we have an OC, but they're still kind of bland. So now I actually give the character. I also just realized I'm 8 minutes into a video about OCs and I haven't defined what an OC is. It means original character, guys, in case you're confused. Let's continue. First, let's clarify what's their main interaction with the world. Usually this just means profession, it tells you how the world sees them, but in this case they sell medicine as a homeless man, which to clarify isn't a profession, but this is how the world usually interacts with the character. As I said before about the town, everyone is broke, so people probably relate to him more than feeling disgusted. If it was a richer setting with higher societal expectations, people would probably be more hostile, but it's not so. Next, motives. The motive usually reflects the character's needs and the scarcity in their lives. So obviously this character is homeless, so they're scarce of everything, but also if I want people to feel bad for him, I can make him mentally scarce as well, with loneliness. So I'm thinking this is someone who everyone acts nice to, but no one really gets to know him. Like people might say hi and let him get some free samples, but no one's giving him a home or an umbrella. This could make his motive to have community, or he is a former doctor. Maybe his motive is to help people, and he uses his skills to provide care to those who can't afford the hospital. Hold on to that motive, we'll need it later. For now, let's focus on conflict, which is the cause of that scarcity. Sure, they're homeless, but why? And I don't mean on a surface level like they got fired or something. Why is this character specifically homeless? Based on their character. It has to be a core part of their identity. Maybe they worked at the hospital but was fired for helping the customers too much. Maybe they're greedy and have a gambling addiction. Personally, I think having them be too generous and too forgiving is a good conflict that's in line with their motives. Now think, how does this reinforce their behaviors? Behaviors are pretty much how a character tries to reach their goal. And Yurgis does this by providing medicine and being forgiving. So when thinking what reinforces that, well, he has nothing. He has to get crafty and be sweet to people for favors. By acting this way, he gets to interact with people socially. By forgiving people, he doesn't have to get hurt emotionally and so on because he avoids rejection. Think of it as being rewarded for your behavior. Now here's where I ask a few questions. Is this character narcissistic or confident? Well, definitely not narcissistic. This character is very selfless, but he is very confident since he puts himself out there. Does this character happen to be chaotic or evil? Well, technically they are on the chaotic spectrum since they're homeless, and the things you have to do to be homeless are kind of chaotic. He probably steals sometimes, loiters. I mean, he probably has a tent right in the middle of town. But he's nice about it, so I'd put him more neutral. And no, not evil. Lastly, are they dependent or in control? I'd say dependent, yeah, definitely dependent. Now here's where we get to the big stuff. Their goals. How is their motive fulfilled? That's basically the goal. By helping people, by being appreciated, they fulfill their goals. So Jurg is a simple man. Values. These should connect their motive back with society. So probably respect, teamwork, solidarity, community, helping others, usually just whatever the character feels is missing from society. Fears. They're threats to their motive. Betrayal, hurting others, being alone, suffering. Obviously, you can add some surface level stuff on there, but these things are more underlying and directly tied to his identity. Now, the flaws. Everyone has them, usually in the form of self betrayal, selfishness, or defense mechanisms. Either way, they must serve the motive. Jurgis is too forgiving, too naive, and too overtrusting. They also seem too selfless, spending all their time on other people. Now we're pretty much done, but I like to add a few more things just to seal the deal, making them feel more unique and helping me craft their backstory. First, I like to slap them with two characteristics based on their conflicts. Let's see, open minded to others and diligent about their work. This means he's always willing to listen to others, and if you give him a job, he's going to do the best work you've ever seen. Next, beliefs. I base these on the values. As an old Cuban man, Jurgis is very progressive. Now, he isn't a Cuban immigrant, no, those guys are very conservative, but Jurgis is actually one of those Cuban doctors that Cuba sends on missions around the world. Jurgis came to America on one of those missions and got stuck here, bringing his collectivist views with him. Next, hobbies and skills. Uh, Basketball? I don't know what homeless people do. Chess, I guess? Also, medicine and reading, but that's nerdy. Also, he can't dance. Cuba, known for his dancing, but he was a nerd. That's what he gets for reading. Skill issue. If you can't tell, I'm just making stuff up at this point, just to make it seem like the character has actually lived, and then just spawn out of nowhere, with no history. Next, I usually give the character an item or an ally, so we'll just give him a dog. Homeless people love dogs. He found a stray dog that was hurt and nursed it back to health. Now they're a duo. Next, bonds. It's the same as their interactions. Everyone knows this guy. People are cool with him. He's probably the closest to the main character, but not super close with anyone. So, no close friends, no family, but yeah, there is nobody. He's lonely. Next, their property. Tells you how prestigious they are. Nothing. He owns nothing. Not even gonna do that, oh my, a teddy bear from when he was 2 years old. Nope, nothing. Nada. He's homeless. And finally, the backstory. The actual cause of scarcities from before their success and their trauma. This is the story of Jurgis. Jurgis was born in Cuba during the early 1970s to a typical working class family. Jurgis never quite fit in, as he was never that good at anything, but growing up he still had dreams of traveling the world and making his nation proud. Finally having some purpose in life. He decided to go into medical practice, where he finally felt useful to those around him and appreciated by his community. Then, when the government gave him opportunity to travel abroad on medical missions as a payment for his education, he eagerly accepted, conducting health missions across the world. Jurgis, being an expert physician at that point, took great pride in his work, usually working in the world's most underserved communities. He always made sure to do the best job he could, giving his patients not only quality healthcare but also a lifelong friendship. However, over 8 years ago, while on a health mission in the US, all transit to Cuba was suddenly suspended in a political move. The Cuban government sent a ship to retrieve the brigade of doctors, which Jurgis missed while in the bathroom. Jurgis then became stranded in America, where he was detained after going to the embassy. The US government decided to use him for anti-Cuban propaganda, showing him how much his life has improved, paying for his lifestyle while giving him a job as a doctor in Doug, Michigan. But Jurgis, while speaking good of America, remained critical of his healthcare system and praising the Cuban government, advocating for better US-Cuban relations. The government would soon abandon him, so he decided to maintain his job as a doctor, but also as a writer. He soon lost his apartment, but continued his work at the hospital. Jurgis would often volunteer and participate in the local community. He He would spend lots of time at the local private park, challenging people to chess, participating in games of baseball, and helping in every community project he could. Even though there aren't really much of those anymore, he still often sneaks into the park, maintaining it since the new owner never does. Things got hard for everyone during the recession, yet Jurgis remained committed to his practice. Jurgis refused to turn away any patient in need, even when unprofitable. This meant often leaking company secrets and sneaking vital medication to patients. As the economy worsened, Jurgis was laid off, along with many others. This forced him to sell off his car and the last of his possessions. With no address nor identification, he's been unable to hold down a job. Now he's homeless, living behind the hospital in a tent encampment. These days, you'll find him at the local library or gym, the only places he can get running water. He often spends his time walking through the city, collecting free samples from local stores and helping those around town who need help with things like moving or repairs, or just giving on-the-spot care and diagnosis using the many skills he learned abroad. He still checks up on the people he used to know and the patients he used to care for, but many have moved at this point. The city's practically a ghost town. Jurgis doesn't have any close friends, well, except that dog he saved. You sometimes see them behind the hospital, but often it's just Jurg alone. Despite that, he's always free for conversation and will always greet you with a smile. He'll listen to you for hours as if he's honored to be in your presence. It's like an air of optimism follows wherever he goes. He looks happy, I think. Now here's where I like to go back to the design and sort of age it up. Now that we know what experiences they had, how does that physically change them? Do they have scars, eye bags, or develop style, health issues, merch? Any imperfections or unique aspects you can add to the design. And after that, I'm done. I look at my beautiful baby. I don't have the skill to pose them or render them, but you can tell who they are, and hopefully you can feel some type of connection to them. I don't really, it's just a drawing. I'm kidding. Yeah, that's all I had for today. If you have your own OCs or tips for making them, leave them down below so that we can sort of improve and have a collective conscience and have an even better way of making OCs. Make sure you like and subscribe while you're down there. And with that, this has been the Vortex. Peace!